How's it going? Adam Drake here, and today I want to talk about refueling, mainly during pit stops. So obviously before a race, it's really simple. You refuel with a fuel bottle. There's really no pressure to try to make sure that it's done super quick. You have time, refuel, send the driver out. During racing though, pit stops are really important, and I have another video planned for some additional information on pit stops. But first I kind of wanted to talk about the basics, because you see a lot of guys have trouble where they never have trouble before the qualifier refueling their car, but usually during a pit stop they will have a problem. And a lot of times it's because things are rushed, the driver gets excited, is applying the throttle at the wrong time. So I want to go over a few tips that will help you have more consistent refueling during pit stops. Now, these methods that I'm going to share with you, it doesn't matter whether you're using a fuel stick, fuel gun, or fuel bottle. Something to consider is that the fuel system is pressurized. So when you come in for a pit stop and you open the tank, that system that's pressurized is now releasing that pressure. So it's a bit confusing for the engine as far as the tune goes, because again, the engine is tuned for when that lid is closed. So the big thing that you need to remember and considering when refueling is when the car comes in for the pit stop, when the mechanic picks the car up, and even when they're releasing it, it's okay to rev the throttle or to help clean out the engine. But when the tank is opened, so when this fuel system, the pressure is changing, you should just let the engine idle. Again, you come in, it's low on fuel, you open the lid, release that pressure, the engine goes lean. If you give it throttle while the tank lid is open, sometimes the engine can draw a little bit of air because you're low on fuel. The system's no longer pressurized. Then when you put a full tank of fuel in, it richens back up, the lid closes, pressurizes it, it's even richer yet. And then when it leaves pit lane, it loads up and dies. So the big thing to remember when refueling is, again, when the mechanic picks up the car, basically from that moment, just let the engine idle. That way there's no chance when the lid opens, when they do the refueling, and until they pull the gun out and release that tank lid, just let the engine idle. Once that lid is closed, it's totally fine to go ahead and clean out the engine before the car is released. But you do not want to, when the lid is open, start applying throttle or revving the engine. You put the cold fuel into the fuel tank, it richens the engine up, you close the lid, it richens even more. Then when you go to leave pit lane, it loads up and in some cases will die. So again, when refueling, it's very important to just not confuse the system even more. And why I kind of brought up in the beginning that you don't usually have this problem when refueling before the start of a race when you're using a bottle is because you're usually not in a hurry. And yes, it does happen. You don't see that your mechanic has the lid open and is topping it off and it goes a little bit lean, he tops it off, closes the lid, it richens up. But usually before a race, again, you're not really in a big rush or a big hurry, and the engine continues to run even though you're kind of confusing that fuel system. So if you want to have more consistent refueling, less chance of having a flame out in the pit, just make sure that at any point when the lid is open, just to let the engine idle. I guess if your engine is, maybe the idle's just a touch On the low side, it would be okay if you wanted to apply just a fraction of a throttle just to kind of help bump that idle up. But if your idle is set properly, you should just let the engine idle during refueling. As soon as you see that the lid is closed, it's fine to pull the throttle, clean out the engine, and exit pit lane.